present my priority bill for this session, LB275. This bill is the next phase of a long-term project that my office has undertaken, which started with an interim study in 2021 to examine the state's practice of intercepting Social Security payments that are meant for foster youth, and then using those payments to pay for the state care of those foster youth. There are many states that do this, and what they do is they identify kids in their care, foster kids, who might be eligible for Social Security funds, and these are some of the most vulnerable kids in our state. These are going to be kids who either have had a parent die or who have an extreme disability. This is the type of person you have to be eligible for Social Security funds as a child. So what the state does is they identify these youth, they apply for Social Security benefits on their behalf, and then the state keeps that money and uses it to pay for the cost of that foster youth's care, or the youth in care. Of course, this is a major double standard because any other youth in foster care who's a ward of the state, they do not have to pay for their own care. They are cared for by the state. But these kids, who are, again, some of the most vulnerable youth that we have in our state in Nebraska, their benefits are being taken, almost always without their knowledge, and used to reimburse the state for the cost of their care. The overarching problem that I see with this is that foster youth should not be seen by the state as a funding stream to cover the costs of their own care. But at a more pragmatic level, I think that if the state is going to do this, then we should all agree that at a minimum, they need to do so with the full consent and knowledge and communication with that child and their legal guardian and their legal representation. This is a government transparency issue, it's a good governance issue, and I think that if this was happening to any other group by a state agency, we would also identify that situation as a problem. But due to the nature of this practice, that the affected population is young, disabled kids, kids who have lost a parent, and a lot of the families and guardians may not necessarily realize what's going on. They might not realize that the kids are getting Social Security payments, that they're eligible for them or whatever. It's sort of a new emerging issue in our state and other states as well. The interim study that we did in 2021 revealed that this practice in Nebraska is affecting approximately 400 children per month, generating over $4 million of funds per year for the state. And these funds, of course, are coming from the Social Security payments that are meant for these kids. So I used the findings from that interim study and did extensive collaboration with stakeholders over the years to bring LB932 in 2022, a portion of which passed in the HHS Committee Bill 1173 to require the department to notify youth and their guardian ad litems if they were benefit eligible and if the state was going to serve as a payee and retain their funds, and to keep an accounting of those kids' assets. This was an important step forward, and we wanted to give it some time to take effect to see what further action might be needed. And my office has been working with child welfare advocates and DHHS on language in this bill to bring us up to speed with progress that has since been made in other states on this issue to bring more transparency, fairness, and just opportunities for foster youth and their guardians to understand what's going on with these funds that they're entitled to. So I have an amendment which I'll talk about in a minute, but I want to talk about what the green copy does. So the copy that we have up right now, that I'm going to introduce an amendment to it, and then I hope that we adopt that amended version. But what the bill does, in summary, is it strengthens department communication with youth and their guardian ad litem about Social Security eligibility screening, the department's application to serve as the child's representative payee, if there's any benefit determinations, and then the right of that child or their representative to appeal or request a different representative payee. It also requires the department to hold the youth's benefit funds in a trust separate from the department's funds, and provide that the youth may request access to the funds for personal use, or that the funds be conserved in a specific manner, because once again, it's the kids' money. It improves access to more detailed accounting information about funds for the youth, courts, guardians, and youth's attorneys. It requires that funds are used by the state in the child's best interest and only when other funding is not available, and are conserved for the child's reasonably foreseeable future needs. And it also requires the department to conserve a minimum amount of funds when the child is 14, increasing at a sliding scale percentage as the child grows older. And it ensures the child is informed about the process to receive and manage their Social Security benefits as they prepare to exit state care as they get older. One of the most important provisions for me is that we save some of these funds for the kid who's entitled to them. And if I had it my way, we would set aside all the funds for them. And a number of colleagues have come up and asked me why it is that we don't do that. And part of the reason is because administering this, applying for the funds on behalf of the youth, seeing if the youth is eligible, creating the fund, this isn't free. You know, it's not free for the state to do that. And so what this bill does is it conserves funds for the youth while allowing the state to tap into some of those funds to make sure that the youth does have the opportunity to have that trust. I'm proud to say that this bill came out unanimously on a 7-0 vote. We had no opposition testimony. We had no neutral testimony. Well, the department submitted some neutral technical input, which we included in the amendment. And the amendment should also address the fiscal note. So if I'd like to get to the amendment, and I see there's Senator Dorn in the queue, so I will cede the rest of my time and answer his question, and then hopefully we can get to the amendment. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Clerk, let's go to the amendment.
Madam President, Senator Hunt would move to amend the bill with AM 1126.
Senator Hunt, you are now recognized to open on that amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, AM 1126, since the bill's advancement and since I prioritized the bill and then it became kind of a serious bill that we got to get real about, I talked to Speaker Arch and it was communicated to me that in order to get it scheduled for debate, I needed to do some work to alleviate the possible general fund impact. So I think that some progress on this is better than nothing. So AM 1126 is a pared down solution that should eliminate or vastly reduce the general fund impact of the bill. It's the product of work between my office, our stakeholder partners in child welfare law, conversations with the Legislative Fiscal Office, and input from DHHS. In the amendment, we've taken input from the department to rewrite and eliminate provisions that will reduce administrative burden, directed the department to maximize drawdown of available Title IXE child welfare funds, and slashed in half the originally drafted amount of funds required to be saved for youth. We also redrafted a provision from the original bill that said the youth Social Security funds could only be used when no other funding is available, replacing it with broader language more permissive of the use of funds, but requiring the department to use the funds consistent with federal law in the child's best interest while conserving benefits for the child's reasonably foreseeable needs. This amendment should substantially drive down the costs. It still keeps some guardrails around the conservation of the funds. It still keeps the transparency so that the youth and their guardians and their legal representatives are aware that the funds are there and how it's being used and things like that. I wish that the percentage of the funds we were saving for the youth was much larger, but this is still a step forward from the current status quo. My objective, and I appreciate the conversations I've had with colleagues to get to a place of support on this. My goal is to get this amendment adopted and move to select files so that we can get a new fiscal note on the bill and get a new updated estimate of the general fund impact, if any. And of course, at that point, I commit to continue working with stakeholders and the department to ensure that the bill is in a place that's workable for everyone involved. Thank you, Mr. President.
Turning to the queue, Senator Dorn, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Senator Hunt yield the question?
Senator Hunt, will you yield to a question?
Oh.
Yes.
Yeah, just looking at the fiscal note, I guess, I understand and maybe I didn't catch quite all of what you were talking about. Understand that you're for the child that's eligible, instead of $1,000 they get to keep, it'd be $2,000. But and maybe you could update us a little bit more on the fiscal note. It says down there that we would have to replace, the state would have to replace that $1,000 per child, and it would cost $3.47 million. Could you, I call it, expound on that a little bit?
So talking about the AM, to reduce the fiscal impact, what the amendment does is it eliminates the annual rescreening requirement, and that's the second highest cost in the fiscal note. And it also eliminates the requirement that DHHS save $2,000 in benefits for each youth. It halves it to $1,000. So we won't have a full picture of the fiscal cost under this amendment until we get it to select. But what the amendment does is it slashes that back to $1,000, which is what's in current law.
It takes, did I hear you right? You said it takes that away? The amendment takes that away, or slashes it back to the $1,000?
That's correct, Senator Dorn.
So then there wouldn't be, basically, then there wouldn't be a fiscal note on this.
Well, we will see. That's my hope.
That's your hope, yeah.
We will see.
Yes, I agree with you. Sometimes we don't understand where the fiscal notes come from, and that's why I thought maybe I was reading it wrong or something, and just as I was looking at it, so that's why the amendment 1126 is filed here to, I call it, deal with that fiscal note. Thank you very much for that explanation.
Thank you.
Senator Hunt, you are welcome to close on AM 1126.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the conversation here. You know, if the state didn't screen youth for eligibility and apply for these benefits on their behalf, it's really likely that none of them would never even be identified as eligible for Social Security benefits. The process is notoriously complex, as my conversation with Senator Anderson kind of alluded to. And my intent here is just to be better stewards of our vulnerable state wards and their assets by involving them and the adults in their life in this process, giving them the right to information about what's happening with their own money, to provide input on how it's being spent by the state on their behalf, and then also to save a portion of those funds, which are theirs, which they are entitled to, for the youth's future that can be used for college or technical education or a car or rent or whatever it is they need. And of course, this, you know, ideally reduces costs on government over time because these kids are able to use their own money to support themselves once they age out and exit the care of the state. For youth in foster care, this money matters a lot. I think that bills like LB275 is one of those great things that can help transition these kids to more financial independence, again, using resources that they're already entitled to. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Hunt. The question before the body is the adoption of AM 1126 to LB 275. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted who care to? Record, Mr. Clerk.
32 ayes, no nays on adoption of the amendment, Madam President.
The amendment is adopted. Seeing no one else in the queue, Senator Hunt, you are recognized to close on LB 275.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Paul Stroman, Senator Stroman, for the conversation. Yeah, thanks, everybody. I appreciate you adopting the amendment. I look forward to seeing what kind of fiscal note we're dealing with for Select, and we'll certainly continue the conversation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Hunt. The question before the body is the advancement to E&R initial of LB 275. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
34 ayes, no nays on advancement of the bill.
The bill is advanced.